I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today. I'd also like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Veronica Gorrie is a Gunai-Kurnai woman who lives and writes in Victoria. Black and Blue is her first book and won Australia's richest literary prize, the $100,000 Victorian Prize for Literature at the Victorian Premier's Literary Awards. Claire Halliday has been a freelance writer for 25 years. As an author, she's had 5 of her own non-fiction books published, including Things My Mother Taught Me and Things My Father Taught Me.
Hopefully people can hear me, and welcome. As Vicky said, I'm Claire Halliday, and I'm coming to you from Melbourne today, as I believe Ronnie Gorrie is too. Welcome, Ronnie.
Thank you for having me, Claire and Vicky.
It's great that the library's put on an event like this, because coming via Zoom gives us access to lots of people in different areas, and it's really important to talk about books in general, and especially stories like this. And as Vicky mentioned, we are here to talk primarily about your book, Black and Blue, but I want to ask you other things about, what else you're working on at the moment, and obviously your life that led up to the writing of Black and Blue. Now, I'm sure there's people in the audience who maybe don't know the story. So if you don't mind, Ronnie, I thought I'd just give just a little background to the story, and then I'd love to ask you some questions. And then, as Vicky said, we definitely want to hear from people in the audience. So anytime you've got a question, please just type it into the chat, but we will come to them in the last 10 or 15 minutes of the session. So your inspiration or motivation, I guess, for writing Black and Blue, it was after watching friends and family suffer under, what you perceive, what is a deeply compromised law enforcement system. And you signed up to become one of a rare few Aboriginal police officers in Australia. Now, you were in the force for 10 years. And during that time in the book, you write about witnessing appalling institutional racism, sexism, but you still push past those things because your focus was wanting to provide courageous and compassionate service to people who needed your help, and many of them Aboriginal themselves. And Black and Blue is the result. That's your account of that time. I just wanted to ask you, how do you feel about your time in the police force now? You were in it for 10 years. Now that you've got that time between and the time to reflect on it further in the book, how do you look back now and view that time in your life?
I still feel, that's a good question, Claire, but I still feel angry and upset. I know right now there's Aboriginal staff within all police all over this country that are going through what I went through. There's been no changes. There's been no changes towards the excessive use of force that's been used towards my people. And you only have to look at the deaths and custody rates right now that are still continuing. So yeah, it'll never change, and I don't know what it's going to have to take for it to change. But I just yeah, it's really hard to work in a very white dominated institution. It's culturally not safe for us as Aboriginal people and people of minority, people who come from the LGBTQIA+ community. If you're deemed to be different than the norm, which is I'm talking about police in my instance, predominantly white male institution, you're ousted on, the word goes. So it's, they put in places that they want to target and reach a target and employ these, our minority groups. And I was a minority of 3. I was a female, I was a single parent, and I was Aboriginal. So they put in these strategies to employ us, but that we know when we're there, we're not wanted. I did stick it out for 10 years, unfortunately. But, in life, you live and learn. I tried my best, but, it's hard going to work when no one, greets you or acknowledges your presence, or, yeah, it's pretty difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, obviously, I'm sure you'd love people to go out and actually, borrow the book or buy the book and find out more about the stories. But for those people who haven't read it yet, I'd love to dig a little bit into some of it without, giving everything away. But you mentioned, that you stuck it out for 10 years. And I'm just wondering, can you just give us a couple of anecdotes about what sticking it out really was like for you?
So with for me just to get to work on a daily basis when I had a shift, if it was 6 to 2, like 6 a.m. to 2 in the afternoon, I'd get there, I'd go to work at 5 a.m. So my strategies was to go there and be in the room when they all walked in. because I knew if I didn't get there at 5 a.m, I'd spend that next hour talking myself out of getting to work. And it's just, this is quite common with Aboriginal people, people of colour, black and brown, and people who are minority. And especially, it creates anxiety, and, you end up having panic attacks. And everyone has their strategies to get to work. And I also, like, when I was working, I worked 3 times, probably more, 3 times harder than the white cop next to me. I had to justify my existence every shift. Within the first 3 minutes of working, someone that didn't know that I was Aboriginal. For instance, I used to train a lot of recruits that came out as first-year connies. So they didn't know that I was Aboriginal. I'd have to tell them that I was Aboriginal because I didn't want to hear racial slurs in the shift. And I don't know any other agency or workforce whereby you have to do that.
And so you're painting a grim picture, obviously, feeling uncomfortable, definitely not feeling respected. And so you mentioned you're trying to get there before they are, so that, you're not giving them ammunition, I guess, to have anything extra against you. But like I said, I don't want to give everything away from the book, but what was actually happening to you on the job?
Yeah, so I was told, personally, I was told that, women shouldn't be in the job. I was told I should be a police liaison officer. Where I was policed in Queensland, the police liaison officers up there don't have arresting powers. They're there to bridge the gap between Aboriginal communities and police. Because I built rapport with my people in my community. I lived and worked in the same area that I policed in. I had 3 children in high school, primary school and high school, and we were embedded within the Aboriginal community. We went to all the NAIDOC events. We attended the Aboriginal Community Health Service in the area that I placed in. So I had to be very mindful of that as well. But also I treated people the way I would want to be treated, and that's with respect and dignity. And I saw them off duty, and and they were respectful towards me, especially when I had my children with me as well.
So you said early on at the start that you felt like it was never going to change, which I guess is not painting a hopeful view. Do you really believe that it will never change, or do you think that there can be a re-education that can, right these wrongs, and that maybe, not tomorrow, maybe not even in this generation, but, can it change ever?
No, in my opinion, it'll never change. It's set out, it's designed the way it's intended to lock up black people, Aboriginal people. We only make up 3% of the overall population in this country, yet we're the highest incarcerated. So I'd like to, it's legal genocide, just through the justice networks, the system. I don't have faith. Like when they have at police academies, they have cultural awareness training. And it's in the last 5 days of, your existence at the academy, and it's pretty much a snooze fest. They're not going to learn much in a half hour. And what you've got to remember is that the people that are getting into the police are the white people, non-Indigenous people and non-minority, are quite privileged and entitled. So they haven't had that lived experience as well, I found. And I guess it's, once with that uniform on, they're 6 foot tall and bulletproof and just treat everyone like shit. But when I trained a lot of coppers coming out of the academy, there's my grandchildren. Can I just tap? No, you can't. That's my grandchildren.
That's all right.
Yeah, so when I trained people, I forgot. Oh yeah, I just emphasize that your role in society with this uniform is no more important than the person that sells you milk and bread or that sells you petrol. You know what I mean? Like we all play our roles in society. And because it used to, it goes to their head. Yeah, police hold a lot of powers. I mean, I don't know anyone else that can stop you in your tracks, and prevent you of your basic freedoms, human rights, which is your freedom. I don't know any other person in this society that can strip search you because they believe you have something on you. You know what I mean? I don't,
No, absolutely.
And so, it's more so when you're Aboriginal, sorry, I'll go on, more so when you're Aboriginal or different, because your police racially profile as well. So, and they're taught that.
So you are painting, you know, a grim picture of that sort of embedded racial profiling, that embedded racism, and you're saying that you can't imagine a time when it will change. So if that's your view, then how would you sort of direct people who feel that they are persecuted in that way to find some sort of hope? Like, because then it becomes, you know, we can't change that. I guess it becomes, how do we cope with that? How do we strategize, you know, our survival and coping with that? So what do you say to that?
So from all my experiences with the police and growing up watching my people being racially profiled and brutalised and excessive use used on them on a daily basis, handcuffed and flogged the shit out of. And this was when I was 5 and 6. I've got memories of that. And then 40 years later or 30 years later, it's still happening, you know what I mean? Like, I've gone off track again.
That's right. I was asking, you know, how you tell people to find hope in that situation. You know.
Easy. Well, if anything, I'm now an abolitionist towards police and prisons. I don't think it's funding police and getting more police on the road, on the streets, isn't the answer. I think the state governments should be spending more money directed to community initiatives, you know, grassroots initiatives. They shouldn't have to lock up my mob for being drunk in a public place. They should, firstly, they should be decriminalising that offence all over Australia. They should be putting them in sobering up places, so not, you know, preventing a possible death in custody. With Aboriginal people, when we have conflict in our homes or in our life, our first responders are our family anyway, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people are like that as well. We don't think to call 000 because we know we don't make good victims as well. We're misunderstood. We're deemed to be violent or angry. For anyone that hasn't read my book, I speak about it in the black part where I was going through family violence with the father of my children, and if police were called by neighbours, or if I was able to get to the phone and call police for help, 9 out of 10 times I was deemed to be the perpetrator, and my children were removed from me, and yeah, it was quite upsetting. But if anything, the life skills that I had and dealing with police as a civilian gave me an understanding of the jobs that I was attending as well.
You've touched on some of those personal stories that you share in the book, you know, very personal stories about your own experiences with many different aspects of life. In retelling that in this book, how painful was that for you to revisit, and how did you kind of look after yourself during that process of writing the book and revisiting these memories and these traumatic experiences?
Yeah, it was quite difficult. Like, it took me 10 years to write. So I started writing on the eve where I've been I retired unfit for duty. So I had the option of quitting the police or retiring medically unfit for duty. So I took that road because I'm not a quitter. Yeah, so it was a hard process. So it took me almost 10 years to write to the publication date. But and there were moments like I couldn't sleep. And then, like, with towards the end of my career, I was diagnosed with anxiety, depression, and PTSD as a result of the stuff that I endured whilst I was in the police. And not just the way I was treated, but how my people were treated as well. And a couple of big jobs that I attended whereby I got physically injured as well. So that's where the diagnosis comes in. But yeah, so it was quite hard. Like, it's hard to write about. Self-care, I mean, I don't know, I just, you know, take time off. But memories, right, because I lost a lot of my memory towards the end of my police career, and I've lost memories of my children growing up. I believe it's called trauma amnesia, and I still suffer that. So I rely heavily on my children to be the keepers of my memory right now, which is probably frustrating for them.
And so, you know what, go on.
Yeah, so like I'd be in bed and then I'd wake up at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and a memory would come, and I'd have to get up and type away before I lost it. Yeah, it was just, yeah, that's how it was. That was the process. So odd hours for 10 years, pretty much.
So it's, I guess, a difficult process in many ways, but in some ways, did you start to see that, you know, one of the reasons you wanted to do the book was that so the book itself would be the keeper of your memories. You didn't want to forget this.
Exactly right, Claire. Nail on the head there. That's why I wanted it. I wanted my story out before I forget anymore.
Yeah.
But also because my grandmother's been passed away, a long time now, and like since she's been gone, like my brother and I, little brother and I, have been digging into the archives to find out about her life, because she was stolen when she was 8 years old from Lake Tyers Aboriginal Trust, but in our language it's called Bunyana.
Landed is a chance to face Fremantle. The winger spent a night in hospital after a crunchy tackle left him with sore ribs.
Yeah, so yes, I don't want my children or my grandchildren or their children after they have to dig into the very racist archives. When I got my grandmother's archives, her ward files, and my father's and all my family members that were stolen by the state government, that was more traumatic than me actually writing my experiences. Okay. Just the racist language that was used by the settlers in the day, rounding my people up like cattle and forced to live in this certain part of their states, and couldn't leave unless they had a work pass, pretty much like COVID. So, when we went through COVID and you had lockdown and you could only have work permits, just, with Aboriginal people, like my elders especially, it would have been a real big trigger from the mission days, but also it's a good thing because they were used to it. Like, white fellas weren't used to it. It was like a bit of a shock to the system being told what to do, when to do, and how to do it. But black fellas, this is how we live daily.
And so do you think, just, generally speaking, do you think white Australia knows enough and appreciates enough about that level of history that you uncovered within your own family archives?
No, I think white Australia is very ignorant in terms of knowing who the traditional owners of the land they're standing on, and not just lands, stolen lands, in fact. Very ignorant, and you weren't born that way, you fellows, right? Racist people aren't born racist. Ignorant people aren't born ignorant. Do your homework, like research where you're living. Also, be kind to traditional owners. Like if you see someone that's not coping in that, and that they self-inflict, it's because they've got traumas in their life, and not just Aboriginal people, a lot of people. So if you see someone down and out, homeless, whatever, you just got to imagine what traumas they're going through their lives. And for anyone that says they've never suffered on mental health or has any mental health, they're lying. Because we just need to treat people with dignity and just have a better understanding what they're going through. And everyone has different tactics and strategies how to deal with their traumas. And, the people that are down and out don't have that. And they don't have that support network surrounding them to get them through that shitty moment.
So you're saying, that people aren't born ignorant, people aren't born racist, this is learned. And, I asked you if you felt like white Australia, generally speaking, knew enough about Indigenous history. So what do you think the answer is? How do we fix that? Like, does it begin in kindergarten and school, and we have to change the curriculum and, make Indigenous storytelling a much more integral part of what's being taught to everybody at schools in Australia? What are some solutions that you...
I think we're starting to get in the right direction. We're starting to get it into the curriculum more. But I think there needs to be a whole overhaul with the education system. It should be taught in preschools, childcare centres. And my grandchildren go to an Aboriginal childcare centre, and they do the flag raising of the Aboriginal flag every day, and they do an acknowledgement to country. They should do that as well. And I know they're starting to do that now, but I have hope that there will be more education about our lives and stuff like that. I mean, when I was in primary school, I was told Captain Cook discovered this country, and then I looked up Aborigine in the dictionary one time when I was in primary school, and we were referred to flora, closely related to flora and fauna. That was quite upsetting, but so I do have hope in terms of the education side, but also if you're adults, do your own research. Like if you go if you're planning a holiday to Thailand or Japan, I'm pretty sure you get so excited. You do all your research, key locations and tourist sites, and also the country's etiquettes and their culture and their traditions as well, because you want to be respectful in their country. Well, guess what? You're in someone else's country right now. Have respect for us and treat us like that.
And so you mentioned about how important this book was to you as the keeper of your memories, and you've talked a little bit about how important it is for your own family to have your story heard and recognised. So, that story is then understood and passed on by your own descendants. But I'd like to ask you, just more broadly speaking, what you actually would like other Indigenous people to take away from the reading of this book, and what you'd like non-Indigenous people to take away from the reading of this book.
With my people, I found with my family, like my extended family, I had to nurture them through the book, so that they'll be texting me. There's a lot of bits that it's quite, they're hard reads, they're difficult to read, so I did have to nurture my family. But with white people, like when you read my book, I want you to have a better understanding that although this is my personal story, a lot of Aboriginal people will resonate with my story. And the difference between me and them is that I wrote about it.
And so what was one of the hardest things for you to write? Not only because you're drawing on the memory yourself, but also because you're realizing that somebody who loves you is now going to find this out about you that maybe they didn't know.
Oh no, my children know everything. There's some bits there that they don't know. My son has never been able to read the book. He still hasn't read it. And it's been out for over 12 months. My daughters have. And my father was the first person to read it, and he's got dementia right now, and he keeps rereading it, which is upsetting for me because it's quite triggering for him.
About it?
Sorry?
I said I was just wondering if it opened up conversations or if it made them feel like that's too hard to talk about.
No, we haven't really spoken about it actually. But when I in this book I do speak about my siblings' experiences as well, and people have to remember that my experiences after I had my children were their experiences as well. So I did get everyone's consent and permission to write about it prior to writing. So they. And my children, and my family. So it's as much as it's my story, it's theirs as well. And I think they they knew what was going to be written about them. I didn't, for spoiler alert here, but I didn't really have a good relationship with my white mother. And I write about this in my book. But so I got, before the book was published, my mother passed away. And so I knew she was terminal. So I sent her the manuscript and she read it before she passed, and she didn't, there wasn't a lot of, there wasn't much good content about her, except for in the last 6 weeks of her life, which she didn't get to read that part, unfortunately. But I hope hope she heard someone else reading it out aloud, or it's on audio books now, so I hope she heard the audio book. And
given that it wasn't, ultimately that favourable about her, why was it so important for you to get her to read it? Was it something that you feel like you couldn't say to her and this was your way of doing it, or?
Yeah, I guess it was hard, hard to have that conversation with my mum about all the stuff that that she put me through, and my siblings. But I also she did get to know that I did honestly forgive her for that. I'm one of those people, I don't hold on to things too long. I move on real quick. And so I think, she was very remorseful for what she did, how she treated us kids and shitty stuff that she's done. Don't want to talk about it. I don't want to give away too much.
Yeah.
But I did forgive her towards the end, and I did write that in. I think she got to read that part. But,
and so you said that you're quick to forgive. Has it always been that way, or is that something that you've really had to work on?
I think I've always been that way. I think at a very young age when my parents divorced and I was quite young, and just watching my siblings, how devastated and sad they were, I was like the happiest kid in the town. because I, like, in my little mind, I thought there would be no more violence, no more alcohol, and no more violence. So yeah, so I was ecstatic when they split up. And yeah, but today, still today, my siblings are grieving their marriage. Like, build a bloody bridge, guys. You know, like, yeah. I think I've always been that way. I don't know. Something must be wired in me. I have no idea.
But that must be a positive thing, though, ultimately, because you are able to, I guess, heal in some way, because forgiveness can be a really, powerful thing. And if you don't forgive, then you're holding on to so many things. So do you feel that it's made you better able to cope with things that have happened to you?
It's not so much forgiveness. It's like, I don't know how to hate. So I truly don't know how to hate. I don't hate anybody. And I think, and one of the big things, I think I wrote about that in my book as well, but it was my mother who taught me not to hate. So that's the only good thing, and that she's handed down to me. It's that. So I truly don't know how to hate. I don't know how to, and I guess, and with the forgiveness part, I guess that made me better. If there is such a thing as a good cop, I was it, because I treated the person who I was wrestling around with the shift before. If I bump into them the next day, I moved on. I didn't worry that you hurt my finger or you spat on me. I still treated them with respect.
Now, I'd love to ask you a little bit more about the writing process, because you've touched on it a little bit. You've said that it didn't come that easily. It was hard to revisit the memories. It was sort of, spanned out over 10 years. But the actual writing process, I'm wondering, did you set yourself a word limit? Did you go, I've got to write 500 words today? Or how did you approach it as somebody who was writing a book, a full-length piece for the first time?
I didn't really have any tactics to write. I just kept writing and writing and writing. Yeah, and now, like, I'm starting my second book, and that's like, I'm struggling there. Like, I've had like 12-month bloody writer's block. I just can't string a bloody sentence together. So yeah, but I have started my second book, and yeah, hope that goes well as well. So
now, is that because this was a story in a way that just had to come out of you? The timing was right. You had to get this out. Whereas now, I guess you've got this benchmark of this first book, and probably you're thinking, I've got to do it better than that one, or I've got to go deeper or something like that. You're putting more pressure on yourself, maybe, or
possibly. Well, firstly, I don't want to be that one book wonder person, that guy. Yeah. But also with Aboriginal people, in terms of wanting to get my book out, Aboriginal people, we have a sense of urgency to do everything and anything. Because I've just turned 51, and statistically, I shouldn't be here. We die at a much younger rate. We're not cared for in the health system, the current health system. Our symptoms aren't taken seriously. I'm like, just last week, I've had three people I know, Aboriginal people under 50, die. And it's common to us. It's normal for us. And then, that's why there's always urgency. So that's why I wanted to get my story out. Yeah, because I do suffer chronic illnesses, and I don't know if I'm, where I'll be this time next year, to be honest.
I'm sorry to hear of the loss of people. Your health is getting any better, or?
Oh yeah, look, I'm one of those ones that look after my health, and I'm that one that's I do attend my appointments, but you've got to think of in my community, we have a lot of people that are too frightened to go to the hospital because they're not treated well. That's my concern. So, and I'm that one that looks after my health, because I will look white people in the eye. They don't intimidate me. But for my family members who are a lot darker than me, we'll be treated like shit. And we've witnessed this. It's not something I made up. I'm just not making it up on the spot. So about 3 years ago, I suffered a stroke for 3 days. I went to the doctors, my GP in the town, and she ignored my symptoms. And it wasn't until 4 weeks later, when I had to see my neurologist, she said that I had a stroke. So having a stroke was nothing like, I was more upset because my GP had ignored my symptoms and not taken it serious. you know, could have.
So, yeah, I'd love to
Then,
do
then the actual
like, 'cause that idea of not being believed. I mean, you know, women of all color and race can feel that, I guess, in some ways more than men, but you're talking about many extra layers, and just wondering how that makes you walk away from that appointment and how you sort of reconcile that after something like that happens to you.
Oh, I have no idea. I just I'm very medically inclined as well, right? Because prior to becoming a police officer, I did want to do medicine. Didn't get in, their loss. No, I'm joking. So I am medically inclined. So, you know, and also you don't have to be like, we all know our bodies. We know when there's something wrong. When you don't feel well, you know that. So just pester your doctors. Like I went to hospital once and they asked me, what's your normal blood pressure rate? I said, I don't fucking know, because then my doctor never takes my blood pressure. Do you know what I mean? Like I have no idea. Is that a thing? Do they do that?
Oh, I don't think it is. I donate blood, so I get to find out every time I go there, and that's I see it as like my free medical exam. But aside from that, I wouldn't know any of that stuff. So you have to sort of seek it out, I think, which is unfortunate.
So gone are the days I used to walk into the GP, like, and that's the first thing they do. You know, they take your temperature and blood pressure and, you know, blood sugar count. That doesn't happen anymore. So maybe they need to have a look at themselves. Yeah, no. But or if you're worried about your health, speak up and ask for it, because you are paying for this service and they do get a lot of money for you to see.
Now, I know we don't want to give away too many spoilers, but I would like to dig into the book just one more little bit before I sort of move on and ask you about more about the next thing you're working on. You know, because we have talked about how hard it was for you to write some of these stories. What are you proudest of, or the story that makes you think, this story, if somebody reads this, it will, you know, create change, or this story will help somebody? Like, is there a moment in the book that makes you particularly proud, a story that you've shared, or the way, you know, that you've shared it, the way that you've actually told it?
Well, I'm glad I got to finish it and that I was able to get it published, but I'm more glad and happy that people are taking the time to read my book. You know, and to win the Victorian Premier, you know, Literary Award, the very same people that committed the atrocities on my ancestors. I find that ironic, but so it means, you know, I've done something right, and if I can educate that, you know, one person, and to take that time, read my book, and just have a glimpse into someone else's life. Yeah, so I don't think there is anything I'm proud of that book. I don't know. I think maybe just getting my story out.
Yeah.
And if I can encourage someone else to write down, because everyone's a writer, you just don't know. You're on social media, you write shopping lists. Everyone's a writer. Yeah.
That's a lovely way to look at it. You really believe that. So you think that people, I mean, obviously everyone has experiences and everyone has stories to tell. So your advice to anyone maybe tuned in tonight would be to sort of, you know, dig deeper into their stories and try to share them so that they are remembered and that they, you know, can be passed on to other people.
Yeah, definitely. Better out than in, I say. But also, like, if you're having trouble if you have communication breakdowns with people, and you know, more so with your family members or children or your parents, write them a letter. Because it's easier to write. Let them read it in their own time. Yeah.
I want to talk about that better out than in. Did you genuinely feel that? Because you've said that, you know, you're somebody who cares for your health. Did you actually feel, I mean, I don't want to delve into cliches too much about, you know, lightening the load and, you know, getting rid of the burden, but did you feel somehow that you had got rid of something, you know, kind of toxic within you just by getting these stories out?
Yeah, in some ways I do and don't. So when I do speak about stuff, you're going really well. You're not touching on anything particular. You're not doing specifics. So, and talking about a particular event or experience of mine, so that I'm finding this really comfortable. But so I find that a lot of people will just go straight into it, and then it takes me 3 days to get over it. So I have my tactics afterwards, you know, and I do look after myself. I go get massages and pedicures, and, you know, and spend time with my children and grandchildren. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad I'm not doing that, and I didn't want to do that.
But if there's a question you want to ask, I don't have any filters.
No,
I'll
that's
answer.
fine.
Yeah.
I think people can get the general idea, and we've touched on things that are traumatic so far that you've talked about. We don't have to go right into everything, and that's why we want people to read the book.
Yeah.
It's important, and it gives them a way to respond to it too, rather than just dropped into a Zoom talk like this where we're going to hit them with really sad stories, because they are sad stories. They are impactful stories and they are important stories. So I wanted to dig a little bit more into what's you're working on next. Now, this might be painful for you because you've said that you're not having that much success at it yet, but it's harder to come for you. But my understanding is that what you're working on is a historical piece about your great aunt who died when she was only 14 years old after being stolen when she was.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, I've dabbled into that, but I'm also I've started that, but I've started another one the other night. It's completely opposite to Black and Blue.
Okay.
And what prompted me to start to write in this style was I do a lot of guest lecturing now with universities all over, and about a month ago I did one at Monash Uni, and one of the students asked, "Are Aboriginal people ever happy?" So that's prompted me to write stories of happiness and just funny stuff that we go through, like our day to day. Yeah, it's going to be hilarious, but well, for me it will be. So that's where I'm going in that way, that direction.
Well, that's kind of like, a nice natural thing. It probably says that you think other people maybe need to read some positivity, but you need to sort of dwell on positivity for a while too, maybe. So
I think that's fun. Yeah, it might be self-care there happening without me even knowing. Because I don't like dwelling on the past. I don't like, it's not all doom and gloom in my world.
Yeah.
All my people's world. Like we have the shittiest, like with Aboriginal families, we have the shittiest days and we still laugh about it. We find things to laugh about, and and we're so funny. But yeah. And I want to write about it. I want people to know that we are happy, even though we've been through, oppression and genocide, and our ancestors stolen, and people dying of tuberculosis that wiped out many communities, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And we've got to remember these things are still happening with the monkeypox coming over, stuff like that. And so
crazy times. Yeah. Now you've written children's books though too. Can you tell us about them?
I've written language books for my grandchildren in Gunai Kurnai language. They're not published, so I just made it for them. But I would like to get into writing children's books. Yeah.
And how important is that preservation?
I don't want fictional characters. I want them to be non-fiction.
Okay.
Gone are the days where Aboriginal people just write. We fictionalize our characters, and we've got a lot of stories to tell, and they shouldn't. I'm not that creative anyway, so.
You don't think so? Well, I mean, sometimes real life is way more interesting than anything possibly you could make up. I just want to ask you, before we see if anyone in the audience might have a question that they'd love to ask you, just about that importance of what you touched on then with the writing of the children's books, that idea of preserving language. How important is that, and what importance should we all, as a broader Australian society, be putting on the preservation of local language, which is something that, as white Australia, we had a huge hand in destroying.
Yeah, so people think, right, because we live in Victoria, we're urbanised blackfellas, Aboriginal people, that we've lost our culture and our language. Yes, we have lost our language. When the colonisers come over here, my ancestors were tied to the tree and flogged if they spoke their language. So the language we had was flogged out of us. But we still have our language. And so me writing my grandchildren's book in language is a revival of that. And I did a play with Melbourne Theatre Company, and I had the majority of that was in Gunai Kurnai language as well. So I'm all about reviving, and I didn't want an English language interpreter. I just wanted the actors, you could get a gist of what they were saying with the acting as well. Yeah, and the way they said the words. So
And before we go to audience questions, you know, you did say before that you did want to be a one-hit wonder, and I'm not saying you're going to be a one-hit wonder, but I do want to talk about the wonder, because winning that major prize, and I know you mentioned the irony of it before, but it must have been a huge surprise, shock. Maybe tell us about how, you know, even the nomination and the pathway to that, and did you think it was possible that you might win, and how did life change for you as a writer, even the way you viewed yourself and your own abilities as a writer after you won that really prestigious prize?
Yeah, it was amazing. It was an amazing night. So firstly, when I wrote a book, I didn't know you could actually win prizes for writing. I had to, you know, closer to my publication date, I was emailed and by a publicist, and I had to Google what a publicist was. I had no idea. So when you have your book published, you have someone that works in the publisher's office that enters all your books in competitions, you know, literary awards. And so I knew that I was getting nominated for all these awards, and, you know, I've been shortlisted for others, but I've never, like, wasn't optimistic that I'd win, because I was up against so many other talented writers as well. Yeah, so it really was unexpected. Hence, if anyone saw me on the night, I had nothing to say. And I was probably pretty drunk.
But how did it make you feel, like, as a writer? Did you know, because everyone doubts themselves.
Yeah, well, it validates. It's quite validating. So it made me feel like that my story was important, but more than that, that people were reading my story as well, and getting it.
Go on.
And getting a, you know, a sneak peek into our lives, and, you know, and my people, because I do talk about other stuff other than just my life.
Yeah.
Talk about stuff like my people and my ancestors that they've gone through as well.
And so who are you reading at the moment? What can you recommend? It could be Indigenous writers, it could be anything, non-fiction, fiction.
Well, I've just ordered, and it's just got delivered. I got a text today. I ordered Trent Dalton's book, The Boy Who Swallowed the Universe. I mean, I can't praise too much about Professor Chelsea Watergay's book, Another Day in a Colony. Drop Bear by Evelyn Rulin, and she just won the Stella Prize. She's an Aboriginal poet, so she's amazing. Yeah, so like I love supporting creatives as well, right? Because, you know, it's a hard industry. You don't really make money from it, as you would know.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's, you know, it's hard to make money from it. Yeah, everyone was well planned and prepared, you know, in the event she won it, but I obviously wasn't, you know, probably because I had no speech prepared. But anyways,
that's all right. At least you've got the prize, and it's an amazing achievement. So it must have made you feel great. Now, Vicky, at the library, I just want to see if there are any questions that we could ask Ronnie.
There's a couple of comments from Jess, I think referring to something you said earlier on, and the comment is, if anything, people in a position of power should be held to a higher standard than others. And Jess has also said that Evelyn Araluan gave a fantastic speech on acceptance of her Stella Prize.
Yeah, she's amazing, Evelyn, and I'm so incredibly proud of her. For people of colour and Aboriginal people to get recognised for our writing, it's amazing. Like, it just, yeah, like we're all out there now. We're just sold, you know. We're doing so amazing within our respective communities and our chosen careers, which, you know, is a good indication that we do have self-determination, and we do not, you know, we can do stuff.
Vicky, I believe there's another question.
There is a question from Georgia. Can libraries play a role in protecting Aboriginal language?
Yeah, if you borrow books, I know in relation to Latrobe Valley and Gippsland, the Gunai Kurnai language, I actually have the dictionary. So it's got the English translation to Gunai Kurnai language. And where did I get that from? It's an Aboriginal language centre in Melbourne, but then a lot of schools and libraries get their resources from them. Yeah, so you can, like, preserve it.
So you're saying that more libraries should have copies of these dictionaries and encourage people to
Yeah,
explore.
especially from the lands that the library's on. So yeah, I know a lot of there's a lot of dictionaries out there. I know Wiradjuri Mob have one. They've even got an app with all their language on it. I think, and it'd be good for the kids to come and learn as well, in the kids' corner. We've got another question by Sheza. I'm a white grandmother who's horrified of the treatment of Indigenous women. Probably not Sheza. Yeah. Sheza, I don't know what nationality you are. Maybe you just write about your own.
Sorry, what was the question, Ronnie, for the rest of us who didn't see it?
So I'm a white grandmother
see it,
mother who is horrified with the treatment of Indigenous people. I have started to write a fictitious novel about 3 generations of Indigenous women of the Kimberley region. Do I have to write about a story that I have not experienced? And thereby I say, no, you shouldn't write it. We're more than capable of writing our own stories. Maybe have your characters the same nationality as you. You know what I mean?
And responding to that environment and responding to what's going on around them, but not trying to.
Yeah, because
Indigenous
women in wherever, like say in Victoria, are different to 3 Indigenous women in the Kimberleys. But also, it's not your story to tell, either fiction or non-fiction. We get quite upset about that when we get non-Indigenous people writing about us. I mean, if you do, you could probably get an Aboriginal consultant, and if you get any, pay them for the work, obviously. So I also do that right now. I do a lot of consultancy work with films and television as an Aboriginal consultant. Yeah, it's like if they want an Aboriginal person in the lead character, and I'm working on one now with BBC and Stan, and it's coming out. Starts filming at the end of this month, but yeah, that's a really good platform that I've moved into as well. And the people that I'm working with, BBC and Stan, they're so respectful, and like they're taking everything on board, right down to the props as well. Yeah.
Well, Ronnie, I know you said, at the start you were saying, oh, this isn't going to change and that's not going to change. And then you said, you focused on having to take away time maybe from a sad project now to look at a positive project. But I mean, there is some positivity, because what you just said then is, even you being regarded and respected and hired and valued as a consultant, and people care about at least trying to get it right, is a positive step in some way. We have a long way to go. I'm not acknowledging that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
it is small steps in some.
Yes, I do hold hope. So we're getting employed for our knowledge, and and because gone are the days where Aboriginal people, we do stuff for free. A lot of people take advantage of that for our knowledge. Yeah, gone are those days. You get funding, pay them. Yeah, so I do hold hope that we are living. We'll get there one day, but and there's good and bad in everyone, I guess. But yeah, just that's how it is.
Yeah. Vicky, are there any more questions that people have typed in? Or
there aren't, but I have my own question.
Yep.
You touched earlier on having sought consent and approval from your siblings or family members who you mentioned in the book. I just wondered whether the publishers had any issues when you presented them, perhaps at the initial stage of looking for publishers. Perhaps you could talk a little bit about how that worked for you and whether there were any issues given the subject matter of the book.
Yeah, so they firstly, when I first gave them the manuscript, I had no names or no locations named. Everything was anonymous, and I was very descriptive. So, but towards the end, they suggested that I put in people's names. So I had to go back to my family and ask if I could do that, their names and then locations of towns and cities within the book. And they suggested that it would be easier for the reader, I guess, and it's obviously worked. But with terms of other stuff, so the book's broken up in 2 parts, black and the blue. So we had to be mindful of the blue part. So they got their lawyers to have a look over it as well. but I do, like, I'm legally switched on, and I know what I can say and what I can't say in terms of defamation laws. So yeah.
Now, Ronnie, of course, like when you live through any experiences, good and bad, there's growth, or hopefully in most people's lives, there's some kind of growth. And obviously you grew through your experiences, but I wanted to ask you also, you know, that extra layer of reflection, that writing a memoir, that revealing your story to other people and to yourself in a way, it gives you that sort of bird's eye view, looking down on your own responses to things that you know you already went through. But what growth do you think you've had since putting it in writing and being able to sort of have that critical look at your own life and explore those memories?
So when I left the police, I was really worried that I wouldn't be able to do, you know, I wasn't, the skills that I'd learned in policing, I would never be able to use outside of policing. But hey, I learned to write whilst I was a police officer, so when you write court documents, when you charge someone, you've got to present paperwork to court, you write a summary of facts, and that's anything up to like 2,000 words. It's like a mini essay on somebody else's life. And yeah, so I actually learned to write by being in the police. So that's one good thing I've taken that away. So I'm proud of the style of writing, but also having, now that I've, you know, if anyone who's watching tonight who doesn't have my book and then buys it and reads it, I want them to feel that I'm sitting beside them, just having a chat or a yarn with them. And yeah, so I really want you to have that sense. But and for the ones who intend on buying it and reading it or borrowing it, be mindful it's quite heavy in parts, and to take care when reading. Take little breaks and practice self-care as well.
I think that's good advice, and thank you for that. It's been such a pleasure chatting with you, and thanks for sharing, you know, so many, it's tough sharing personal details and putting them in a book. And, you know, even talking tonight again, digging into, you know, the stories of your ancestors and the stories of your own life. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much to La Trobe Library for making this event possible. Thanks, Veronica Gorrie, for being with us and sharing those stories. Black and Blue is the book that we've been talking about. Thanks to everybody who's taken the time out of their evening to join us. Ronnie, did you want to have a last word of saying anything?
No, just take care when reading. That's all, and take breaks. Look after yourself. Thank you. Thanks for watching.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your time, both of you. It was absolutely fabulous. And there are comments coming up saying much the same thing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks
Have everyone. It's cold tonight.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.